The wind howled through the thick forest as Ethan locked the wooden door of his cabin. The storm had arrived faster than expected, with dark clouds covering the sky and heavy rain flooding the forest paths. He had stocked enough food, stacked firewood, and turned on the heater. The cabin was silent except for the sound of crackling flames and raindrops hitting the window. He made some hot tea and sat down with a book, ready for a quiet night alone. But then came a knock. 3 slow knocks, soft but clear, cutting through the sound of the storm. Ethan froze, his cup halfway to his lips. Who would be out here, this deep in the woods, in weather like this? No one knew about his cabin, not even his closest friends. He walked slowly to the door, heart beating harder. He opened it just a crack, and there she stood, a girl, soaking wet, hair glowing faintly under the porch light, silver like moonlight. Her skin was pale with a strange shimmer, and her large violet eyes locked on his face. She wasn't shivering, even though she wore thin clothes not made for rain or cold. "Please," she said quietly, "I need shelter." Ethan opened the door wider, still unsure, but something about her seemed different, not dangerous, not violent, just lost. He handed her a towel and guided her in. She looked around the small cabin like it was a museum, touched the wooden table, stared at the ceiling fan as if it might attack her. Her fingers traced the edge of the television with deep curiosity. "Strange designs," she murmured. "Humans shape their environment with warmth." Ethan blinked. "You okay?" "What's your name?" She tilted her head, like the question confused her. "You can call me Tyra." She answered, "I will stay here tonight and leave when the sun returns." He brought her a dry blanket and one of his clean t-shirts. "You can use the guest room," he said, pointing to the small room at the end of the hallway. She nodded and walked like she had never worn boots before, each step careful. Before closing the door, she looked back at him and asked, "Are all human males as warm as you?" Ethan raised an eyebrow but laughed. "Is that a compliment?" She gave no smile, just a serious stare, and closed the door. Hours passed. Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment, how her voice sounded, how her skin seemed to glow, how her eyes didn't look scared but curious. He wondered if she was some kind of runaway, or part of a strange cult, or maybe just someone with a condition he didn't understand. Still, something felt off, something just under the surface. At around 2:00 a.m., a soft knock came from his door. He sat up, alert. It wasn't the front door this time, it was his bedroom door. A whisper followed, just loud enough to hear. "I heard your breathing change," she said softly from behind the door. "Is that part of the mating phase?" Ethan's heart nearly jumped out of his chest. "What?" he said, confused, but she didn't explain. Only silence followed. The next morning, the rain had stopped, sunlight filtered through the mist. Ethan got up early, made coffee, and wondered if the night before had really happened. Then the guest room door creaked open, and she stepped out, wearing his shirt and towel wrapped like a robe. "Human reproduction," she said, "is very physical." "Yes," he nearly choked on his coffee. "Why are you asking that?" She blinked, her face calm. "Because I want to learn." He placed the mug down slowly. "Learn what?" "Exactly." She walked over to him, stopped just a few feet away. "Everything," she whispered. "Everything that makes you human." Ethan didn't know whether to run, call for help, or stay completely still. But one thing was sure, this was not an ordinary girl, and the storm that brought her wasn't just a weather event. It was the start of something much, much bigger. Ethan didn't sleep well that night. He kept replaying her question in his head. Is that part of the mating phase? What kind of guest asked that on the first night? In a stranger's home. But in the morning, she was already in the kitchen, standing completely still, watching the toaster with wide eyes. She jumped slightly when the bread popped up, then smiled as if she had just witnessed a miracle. Humans are always creating little explosions to prepare food," she said with a tilted head. "Very exciting." Ethan chuckled awkwardly. "That's just toast." She nodded like she'd just learned something deep. Then she grabbed a fork and examined it like it was an ancient artifact. While he ate breakfast, she sat across from him, quietly copying the way he held his spoon. "Are these utensils part of your reproductive display?" she asked. Ethan nearly spit out his coffee. What? No, this is just eating. She didn't seem embarrassed, just curious. Then she followed him to the bathroom. He paused at the door, raising an eyebrow. You planning to watch me brush my teeth too? I must observe your routines, she said with full seriousness. Ethan sighed and let her stand in the corner. He brushed his teeth, watching her in the mirror. She studied every motion, the way he squeezed the paste, how he moved the brush. Then, without a word, she grabbed the second toothbrush he'd placed for guests, copied the paste amount exactly, and tried brushing. But she gagged immediately and dropped it into the sink. You clean bones? She asked while rinsing her mouth with water. Not bones, Ethan said, smiling. Teeth, they are very hard, she whispered. You polish them as if they are sacred. He handed her a towel. Maybe just try mouthwash. Next time, later, while sitting on the porch with a warm drink, she spoke again. I was trained in your language, she said, but no training could prepare me for this. Ethan leaned back in his chair. This? She motioned toward the trees, the coffee mug, and the smell of pine smoke in the air. Your world is so alive, she whispered. Even your silence has noise. That moment held something strange, something peaceful, but it didn't last long. A blue light blinked under the skin of her wrist. She noticed it, covered it quickly. But Ethan saw it. He pointed. What's that? She hesitated. It's nothing, just a monitor. He didn't press further, but his gut tightened. That evening, she stared at the fireplace for over an hour, then said suddenly, your species bonds through physical contact. Ethan blinked. Sometimes, can I try it? She asked. The holding part, you mean? A hug? Yes. She replied calmly. I want to feel the data exchange. Ethan stood slowly, a little unsure. She walked to him and wrapped her arms around him, not tightly, not softly, just controlled. But then something happened. She stiffened, her breath caught, and she pulled away fast. Eyes wide, my heart rate increased. She whispered, I didn't tell it to. She looked at her hands like they betrayed her. I was not programmed for this, she said, almost to herself. Ethan stepped back, gently. Tyra, are you okay? She looked up, and for the first time, she didn't speak. She only nodded slowly, then walked away toward the guest room. Before closing the door, she said softly, my body is reacting to you. Then she added in a quiet tone that chilled, Ethan, human methods might be more powerful than our own. The door clicked shut, and Ethan stood alone in the room. His chest felt tight, not from fear, from something stranger, something growing between them like a shadow neither could explain. It was supposed to be a normal day. Ethan woke up to the smell of fresh rain and the quiet hum of the forest. But as he opened his bedroom door, something felt off. The air in the cabin was heavy, like it was holding its breath. He walked to the kitchen and found Tyra already there, but this time, she wasn't poking the toaster or watching him like a curious child. She sat perfectly still, hands flat on the table, eyes unfocused. Something in her had shifted. Morning, Ethan said gently, you okay? She didn't respond right away. Then slowly, she turned her head. My skin feels warmer than usual, she whispered, and my pulse is no longer stable. Ethan moved closer, his concern growing. Are you sick? She looked at him, eyes slightly glowing in the dim morning light. I think my body is changing. She lifted her sleeve to show her wrist. The veins under her skin pulsed with a soft blue light, brighter than before. The biocore in me is reacting to something, she said. It only activates during reproductive. Sensing. Ethan froze. Wait, sensing with what? She stared at him, her voice barely above a whisper. With you. The room fell into silence. He took a step back, trying to understand. You mean just from hugging, talking, that's enough to trigger whatever this is in my species? She said, we do not feel emotions like yours, but something inside me is mimicking human bonding. Then her hands trembled. She grabbed the table, breathing heavier. I don't know how to stop it. Ethan helped her sit down, grabbing a glass of water. As she drank, her breathing calmed slightly, but she held her chest like her heart was beating too loud for her own ears. I feel attachment, she said, desire to stay close to you. She looked up, eyes wet, but not crying. This is not part of my design, she added. This is something new. Later that day, Ethan insisted on taking her to town. He told her they'd find a doctor, run some tests, figure it out. Tyra hesitated, but agreed. At the clinic, the nurse took her vitals but frowned at the results. Her readings aren't normal, she said. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure unusual, body temp fluctuating every few minutes. Is she pregnant? Ethan asked, half jokingly. The nurse looked at him seriously. That's not impossible, she said. Her body's acting like it's entering some sort of reproductive alignment. Tyra didn't flinch. She only whispered, I don't even know if I'm capable of pregnancy with a human. Ethan felt heat rise in his neck, not from embarrassment but from confusion and fear. Was this really happening? On the way back to the cabin, Tyra was quiet. She stared out the window, face unreadable. Finally, she spoke. There is something deep inside me, she said. It's waking up. That night, she stood outside under the stars, barefoot in the grass. Ethan joined her silently. She didn't look at him, just asked one question. If I become more like you, will you still accept me? Ethan didn't answer at first. He looked at her glowing skin, her uncertain eyes, then said softly, if you're asking if I'm scared, the answer is yes. She turned slowly, surprised. But I'm still here, he added. I'm not leaving. She stepped closer. So, you would help me, even if this becomes dangerous? Ethan looked straight into her eyes. You're not just my guest anymore, Tyra, he said. You're part of my life now. The wind moved through the trees, but nothing could move them from that moment. She took his hand without asking, and for the first time, she smiled not as an alien but as someone who was learning how to feel like a human. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered the way Tyra looked at him under the stars, not like a guest, not like a stranger, but like someone trying to become something else, someone trying to belong. In the quiet of midnight, he heard footsteps again, soft, careful, like before. His door opened slightly, not knocking this time, just her voice, gentle and unsure. May I enter? He nodded, and she stepped in, wrapped in a blanket, her glowing skin faint beneath the fabric. Her translator device blinked in her ear, but she removed it slowly and placed it on his nightstand. I want to speak to you without filters, she said. Just me. Her voice changed without the translator, more melodic, more natural. Every word carried weight, like it came from her soul and not a machine. I feel something inside me, she said. A need to understand, not just with my mind, but with my body. She moved closer, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked down at her hands. In my world, reproduction is sterile, clinical, no touch, no heart. She looked up at him. But you humans, you love with your entire being, she whispered. It's messy, illogical, terrifying, and beautiful. Ethan said nothing. He could hear his own heartbeat, louder than the ticking clock on the wall. She reached out slowly, touching his hand. Teach me, she whispered. I want to feel what you feel. He looked into her eyes, seeing fear, hope, and wonder all mixed together. You sure about this? He asked. This isn't just curiosity anymore. Tyra nodded, her voice shaking. This is instinct now, not program. He didn't pull her closer, didn't rush. Instead, he spoke softly. Human intimacy starts with trust, not action. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Her breath was warm, uneven. I trust you, she said. More than anyone in my life. The blanket slipped from her shoulder, not in shame but like someone shedding armor. Her body trembled, not in fear but because of the storm inside her, a storm even she didn't understand. But Ethan wrapped her in the blanket again, gently. Then let's take it slow, he said. You're learning how to feel, and that takes time. She exhaled with relief, nodding, then whispered something in her native tongue. The translator blinked quietly on the table but stayed silent. She had spoken something sacred, something she didn't want translated. Moments later, she fell asleep beside him, not as a lover, not yet, but as someone surrendering to trust for the first time in her life. The next morning, Ethan woke up alone in the bed, but the smell of food filled the cabin. He walked into the kitchen and froze. Tyra was cooking missilli, but trying. She turned and smiled, holding a pan full of half-burnt eggs. I'm learning human care rituals, she said. This is breakfast in bed, yes? He laughed, surprised and touched, but just as he sat down, The blue veins on her arms glowed again brighter, pulsing. Her eyes fluttered, and she gripped the counter. I feel it again, she gasped. The fusion is accelerating. Ethan rushed to her side, helping her sit. What do I do? How can I help? She looked at him, voice breaking. Just stay near. It only stabilizes when you're close. Ethan stayed right beside her, holding her hand. As her body calmed, she leaned against his chest, eyes closed. My people will come for me soon, she whispered, but I no longer know if I can return with them. Ethan didn't answer right away, because deep inside, he already knew this was no longer about science, or species, or biology. It was about something deeper, a bond no one trained her for, a bond no human expected, but one that had already started to grow right here in this little wooden cabin at the edge of Earth's forest, between a man and a guest who was becoming something more. Tyra hadn't eaten for 2 days, not because she was refusing, but because her body was changing so quickly. Food no longer worked the same. Ethan tried to cook meals she might like, but every bite made her dizzy. She didn't complain, though only whispered, I think my system is rewriting itself. That morning, Ethan found her collapsed on the porch. She had fallen asleep in the rain, curled in a ball, skin glowing faintly even in the daylight. He rushed to her side, lifted her into his arms, and placed her gently on the couch near the fire. Her breathing was shallow, her skin warm like a fever, but when he checked her forehead, it was ice cold. Tyra, he said softly, talk to me. She opened her eyes slowly. Don't be afraid, she whispered. I think this was always going to happen. From the moment I met you. Her fingers gripped his sleeve. I feel things I was never meant to feel, she said. I'm not just learning, I'm becoming. She tried to sit up but collapsed again. Her body started to tremble then, suddenly stopped. Her chest glowed with a bright line just below her collarbone. Ethan stared in shock. What is that? My seed core, she whispered. It's active, in my species. That only happens when one's body is preparing for deep genetic merging. It's irreversible once started. Ethan sat beside her, heart racing. What do you mean irreversible? She looked at him, voice trembling. My biology has chosen a bond with you. Before he could answer, a loud crack of thunder shook the cabin, but it wasn't thunder. Ethan ran to the window and saw lights in the sky swirling, pulsing, descending. A ship, her people. Tyra tried to stand but fell to her knees. They came too soon. She said, I'm not ready. She reached for Ethan's hand. If they take me now, they'll separate us, extract the core, reset me, erase this. He knelt beside her, helping her sit upright. No, he said firmly, you're not going anywhere like this. You trusted me, he continued. Now it's my turn to protect you. Tyra's eyes filled with something Ethan never expected to see in an alien, tears. I can offer something, she said suddenly, pulling a small stone-like object from under her skin, a glowing shard, pulsing with life. This is a bind stone, she said. If I give it to you, my people will recognize the bond as sacred. Ethan looked at it, unsure. What happens if I take it? You'll be connected to me, she said, not just in body, but in thought, emotion, memory. It's permanent. The lights outside got brighter, louder, closer. Ethan looked at her, this strange, beautiful being who had crashed into his life. Not just a visitor now, not just a guest, but something more. He reached forward and touched the bind stone. It pulsed, glowed brighter, and melted into his skin. A surge of warmth spread through his chest, memories not his own, feelings too deep to describe. And then her voice echoed inside his mind. I'm with you now, outside. The humming of engines stopped. A silence fell over the forest. Rescue mechs landed, scanning the area, but when they detected the bond, they stopped. They couldn't take her by force, not without breaking their own laws. Tyra exhaled slowly, leaning against him. You've saved me, she whispered, but you've also bound your life to mine. Ethan smiled gently. Good, he said. Now let's find out what that means. Ethan didn't feel the bind stone burn. He felt it breathe. From the moment it melted into his skin, something inside him had changed. It wasn't painful. It was personal, like a second heartbeat, pulsing beneath his own. Tyra sat silently on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket she once wore when she first arrived. Her skin was no longer glowing. It shimmered softly, as if alive. Her breathing matched his now, as if they were tuned to the same rhythm. When Ethan thought of her, she looked up without him saying a word. "I heard that," she said quietly. "You heard my thought?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "It's not full words, not like talking," she explained, "more like feelings painted across silence." The bond was real, more real than he expected. Later that day, Ethan sat near the fireplace, staring into the flames. He tried not to think too much, but his thoughts were loud. What if her people came back? What if they changed their mind? What if this bond destroyed her instead of saving her? Tyra walked in from the hallway and sat beside him. "You're afraid," she said. He didn't even deny it. "Yeah," he replied. "I am." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Your fear feels different from ours," she whispered. "It's not weakness, it's care." Outside, the wind picked up, and the skies turned silver again. Ethan looked through the window and saw 3 distant lights hovering above the mountains, silent. "Waiting. They haven't left," he said. "They won't interfere," Tyra replied. "Not unless I break the bond. But I won't," she added, her voice fierce. "I won't let them take this away." That night, she showed him something else, a memory not in words, but in images flowing from her to him. He saw her, first days as a scout, floating above Earth in a cold chamber, no warmth, no emotion, no laughter, only mission reports and sterile orders. Then he saw her crash flames, trees, darkness, and then, his hand reaching out in the rain. Ethan exhaled sharply. "I felt all of that," he said. She looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "Now you know what it means," she whispered. "To be more than just flesh." But even as they shared warmth, something darker lingered. That night, the bond flared suddenly, without warning. Tyra clutched her chest and cried out. Her body arched, eyes glowing bright, and her voice turned metallic. Ethan rushed to her side, holding her tightly. "What's happening?" he asked, panicking. "It's not you," she gasped. "It's them. They're trying to override my biocore, force a reset, erase everything." He held her close, whispering, "Stay with me, Tyra, don't let go." But her body started to flicker like she was phasing out of existence. Suddenly, the bind stone in his skin pulsed hard, sending out a shockwave of energy. A golden light exploded from his chest, wrapping around Tyra's body like a shield. The flickering stopped. Her breathing returned, and the alien signal was gone. She collapsed into his arms, exhausted but alive. "You protected me," she said, barely conscious. He held her tight. "We're bonded," he whispered. "No one gets to rewrite that." As she drifted into sleep, Ethan sat there in silence. He wasn't just protecting a guest anymore. He was guarding someone whose life was now woven with his. Their bond was no longer just emotional or spiritual. It was biological and unbreakable. The forest was quiet again. No more lights in the sky, no strange signals from above. For the first time since her arrival, Tyra stood barefoot on the cabin porch, not in fear, not in confusion, but in peace. Ethan walked beside her, watching. Her eyes take in the early morning mist. She looked stronger now, calmer, but still alien in the soft shimmer of her skin. The bond they shared had become something neither of them fully understood. Not just connection, not just closeness. It was belonging. "They stopped trying to reach you," Ethan said softly. Tyra nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "because I stopped replying. They know I've made my choice." She turned to him, brushing her fingers along his arm. "My species doesn't believe in love, Ethan," she said, "not like yours. But now I know what it feels like, and I won't give it up." Ethan swallowed hard. "You could have gone back," he said, "been safe, surrounded by your kind." Tyra looked at him with a small smile. "I was never safe there," she replied, only silent. "But here, even when I was terrified, I felt alive." They spent the next few days together, doing the most human things, cooking badly scrambled eggs, planting small herbs by the porch, reading old books aloud, and laughing. So much laughing. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, something unusual happened. Tyra gasped suddenly, her hand going to her stomach. Ethan rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, eyes wide with surprise. "It's not pain," she said. "It's life." He stared at her, trying to understand. Then her hand took his, pressed it gently against her belly. A faint warmth pulsed under her skin, I thought. It was impossible, she whispered. Different species, incompatible biology. But the bond changed something. It's real, Ethan, she said, her voice shaking. We created life. He sat down slowly, his entire world spinning. A child, not just hers, not just his, theirs. She laughed softly at his shocked face. You look like your brain just melted. He smiled, stunned. Maybe it did. They spent that night sitting by the fire, not speaking much, just holding each other, outside. A single light blinked in the sky, one of her kind. Perhaps watching, perhaps recording, but they didn't approach, they didn't dare. Tyra had chosen, and her people had accepted it quietly from a distance. They knew a new path had begun, and they couldn't interfere anymore. Weeks passed. Tyra's body adapted quickly, more human with each day, yet still uniquely alien. Her laughter became easier, her eyes brighter. Ethan built a small extension to the cabin, not for guests, but for family one night. She stood by the window and whispered, "If someone asked me what I found on Earth, I would say." Then she turned to him. "I didn't find information," she said. "I found a home." And Ethan knew it wasn't just a love story or a science experiment. It was the start of something rare, a future built on curiosity, trust, and a connection that crossed the stars. The alien guest had arrived as a stranger, but she stayed as something more, a partner, a mother, a bridge between worlds. And for Ethan, she wasn't just the first to experience human reproduction. She was the first to understand it, not with words, but with heart.